Hey guys, this is Brad from Blue Nile Farm. Welcome to episode number 21 of our podcast series, Starting a Farm from Scratch. And today we're going to talk about going to dealerships and to really do some homework and finding out what's actually on the market and finding that specific machine that you're looking for. You know, most of us, that have purchased cars and tractors in the past, and I'm very guilty of this, and this is one of my greatest mistakes, is that I did not do enough research before I purchased most of my tractors. I just kind of go out, I find something I like, and I just jump on and buy it. And I really don't do enough research to find out if that's the best fit for me. And this is kind of why I'm alluding to this, is because I'll save you a lot of grief and you'll learn more things by taking this advice than most people don't follow. And that is, if you're looking for a tractor, whether you're looking for a skid steer, or looking for an excavator, looking for any machinery out there, and the things are out there that you can purchase that are new, I suggest the best thing you can do is go to a dealership and start doing some research. Now, what's nice about a dealership, it offers a lot of different environments for you to deal with. And, one thing is that when we go out and make a purchase, sure, at a dealership, you have a good possibility of purchasing something new. And I think it's best to start with something new, even though you may not be able to afford it, but it gives you an idea of what it's out there and what it's worth. And then from that standpoint, you can kind of break down from there. If you have a machine that's a certain size, or maybe you would just want to get educated on what kind of equipment's on the market, what options that come with that piece of equipment, what that equipment can do, and by talking to multiple people at multiple dealerships is the only way you're going to learn. And because price is so important, that's why we want to start off at a dealership. We want to understand what the prices are. We want to compare different models that different manufacturers have and what that piece of equipment has to offer in exchange for what the price is. And it really comes down to is, what are the bells and whistles they're selling me? Is this tractor run better than the other tractor? Does it have a better engine than this machine? Does it operate smoother? Does it have four-wheel drive? Is it easier to access? Is it easier to park? Is it easier to shift? I mean, there's a million zillion different things that only you would know what you like in a machine. And that's why you need to go and talk to these dealers, because that's the best way for you to learn a little bit about what you're buying. Going into a dealership when you're an uneducated buyer, which I have been in the past, I'm guilty of it. It's just like anybody else, and we all start somewhere. We make that big mistake. It's just like going for a car. You go in and say, I want an SUV. Well, what do you have on the line? They'll show you 3 or 4 SUVs right at that dealership. You find the one that works best for you, and you probably will buy it. And, I think a lot of people don't mess around. They just go in and buy that piece of equipment, and they move on from there. So I personally think that you're better off not to go buy something right away and to do your homework and to start asking around and find out that's something you want to do. That to me is more important. And the other thing that you look at too when you go is you want to compare certain deals that are offered by that dealership, because when you're dealing with prices, you want to find out what deals they offer. Sometimes they'll throw in a brush hog, or they'll throw in another piece of equipment for the money, or maybe they'll throw in a loader, or a loader could be cheaper. You want to find out what they actually will give to you. Sometimes they'll even do a price match where they might even do some kind of negotiation leverage that, hey, if I buy this tractor at this dealership, it might be cheaper at this dealership. Maybe they're both Kubota dealers. Maybe you can get one that'll come down on their price. So you can do competitive pricing like that. That works well. And maybe certain dealerships have certain promotions that may make that a better package for you to purchase. The one thing that when you go to a dealership, which is different from buying from a private seller, is that they might have a wider selection of equipment, and it gives you an inventory for you to look at. And when you can compare different models on the line and say, hey, I like this model, I like that model, or what's the next size up? Because for me, one thing I've learned is when I was looking around for my second tractor, brand new. I've only bought 2 tractors brand new, and the last one I bought, I needed something that was bigger than the one I had. The first tractor I purchased brand new was a 55 horse utility tractor. The next tractor up, I bought a 70 horse. And the reason I bought the 70 horse tractor over the 55 horse is because I was mowing hay at the time, and I was having trouble with the 55 horse. I got frustrated with that manufacturer, and I decided to go buy a brand new 70 horse tractor. And what I liked about it was that it was almost like a step above. It was almost like it came with bells and whistles of a 100 horse tractor, and you could see the difference in size and refinement of that machine that kind of blew away the 55, 60 horse model. It's like every manufacturer has a line that when you hit a certain level, it kind of transitions from looking a little smaller, then also it kind of comes with more bells and whistles. And that's kind of what I liked about the 70 horse tractor that I bought, and that's why I have it. I was sold by what it had to offer. So these are things that you can check on when you look at different inventories. Also, a lot of times you go to dealerships, you might have somebody that's selling new equipment and used equipment, and you can compare the new and the used. Maybe a trade-in price will be good. There's a lot of used equipment out there depending on the size of the dealer, and you may get a better deal buying a used piece of equipment, but you did your homework on a new tractor, so you kind of know what you're getting into. And just because that tractor has a little bit of hours on it, it might be worth a $20,000 reduction in cost based on the amount of hours it has or what it came with. So something to keep in mind when you go to a dealership. Also, different brands, when you shop at multiple dealerships, you're going to look at different brands and different models. And say, for example, you're stuck on a range of 50 to 70 horsepower tractors. Look at all of them. See what they have. Look at their transmissions. Look at how smooth their loaders are. Drive them. See how they handle. See what they come with. Most of them all, find out if you want a cab. Find out if you don't want a cab. Check it out, because that's the best thing you can. And sometimes there's certain options that come with these tractors that might make a difference between having a cab and not having a cab. So you need to kind of find out what works best for you. But again, brand comparison is really why I want to get you guys out to the dealerships and just go to as many as you can. Not one, not two. Go to 6, go to 7, go to 10. Go to a lot of them and find out what is out there. In my area alone, just by talk about brands, probably within 100 miles of me, there's an LS dealer. There's 2 Kubota dealers. There's probably multiple John Deere dealers within 100 miles from me. There's New Holland dealers. There's Case dealers. Oliver, White. Older tractors that that they have on the market. That I can probably find some used pieces of equipment. Depending on how far I go, it's going to dictate the areas around me. And sometimes they have dealers that just deal in used equipment. So, depending on where you decide to find a tractor, you need to get out there and look at everything that you can get your little hands on. Because the more people you talk to, the more you find out what works best for you. And because we're talking to dealers, I want to tell you that a lot of the salesmen that are at a dealership may not be very well educated in farm tractors. There's some guys that just are salesmen. They know enough because they watch YouTube videos and they talk to people, and they may understand the models, but they probably have zero tractor experience, or they don't know a lot about attachments because they never run them. And I've met a lot of those guys. So you want to find somebody that when you buy a tractor, you talk to who's the most credible. That's why by talking to people and the more education you get, the more you can weed out whether that person knows what they're talking about or not. And that'll help you out a lot in looking. Another thing with going to a dealership is, and what's nice about a dealership is you aren't looking for customer support. You want somebody to kind of help you out and see what they'll do for you. What kind of service quality you're going to get with this machine. Are they going to help you out? Are they parts availability? Is it there? What kind of long-term partnership do you have? I have 3 or 4 different dealerships that I have dealt with over the years, and I can walk in, and I'm on first name basis with some of these guys, and some I'm not. But some of them I walk right into, and I can talk to them, and they're very customer service friendly, and that's kind of what I like. And over the years, I spent a lot of money with different repairs. I've had different issues. I've talked to them on different pieces of equipment. Some companies I bought more new stuff from than others. But what I'm trying to say is that you want to develop a relationship with the dealership that you deal with and have them kind of have your back, and that makes a big difference too. Another thing with dealerships, which is nice versus dealing with a private person or even if you go out and buy it at an auction, is financing. A lot of times when you buy something brand new, you have better financing options out there. And sometimes they have different incentives and rebates where they'll do cash back if you buy this piece of equipment, or you could have a rebate. And a lot of times their financing could be 0% or very low interest rates, and that's something you can't beat, because if you go to an ag lender for a new tractor, you might be paying 7% for interest when you can get 0%. And on a new piece of equipment, that's a huge, huge difference. And even if you're buying a used piece of equipment, just the interest rate alone might sway you to go buy a brand new piece of equipment, because you're going to get more years of service and have a warranty on your piece of equipment that might be well worth the option of buying new. I always wonder why farmers have a lot of new equipment. And it's not always because they're in debt, and sure, there's a big debt to it because they are expensive. It's just as expensive as buying a car, if not worse sometimes. But the bottom line is that you're going to get a piece of equipment that makes you money. And so what I've learned over time is the equipment that I invest is not just my extra helping hand, it is what makes me money. And that's the name of the game with this equipment. And it doesn't matter how big or small you are in your agricultural endeavors. Can this tractor make you some money? Because that's how you get your return on your investment. Whether you're doing side work with it, or whether you're selling something from it because it helps you in the selling process, or even harvesting or whatever you do with it, it has to generate income. And that's kind of why I like picking the right equipment, because it can help you out so much down the road. And especially if it's newer, it's going to last longer, and it's going to be dependable. Dependability has a lot to be said for the equipment you buy. Another thing with dealerships, which is nice, is what kind of support you can have after you sell. If you need to go back and converse with them, or you need an upgrade, or you need a modification, can they do this for you? A lot of times it's best to buy everything up front when you do buy something from a dealership, and get as many of the bells and whistles that you can that's going to work for you. But only you're going to know that, depending on the machine that you want and what your needs are. And that's kind of the kicker. For me, I'll leave it at this. There are probably within 100 miles of an area, you'll have a large number of dealers. You need to go see those dealers within that 100-mile location. And I'm not saying, like I said, one or two. I want you to go see all of them and go see all the different brands that are out there, because you may not be negative on a brand, but then go and talk to them and see what they have to say, and try out their machines and find out why you don't like this machine. I've tried different machines out, and like I say, my biggest problem is I go to a dealership, they try to sell me on a machine, I think about it, I go home, I jump on the internet, I start doing reviews, and you'll have a bunch of guys that'll say, oh, it's the greatest tractor for the money, and I love this tractor, and you're all pro that tractor. But the bottom line is, you may not like that tractor. You may find it to be inefficient for what you want to do. And just because somebody else tells you it's good doesn't mean it's any good. Just like me telling you something, you might think, oh, that guy's full of shit. Why should I listen to him? Because I made these mistakes, and I'm trying to tell you this is what I would do if I did it all over again. But, you'll find out the hard way if you're not happy. So it never hurts to do your research. It's not going to, these people are not going to sell the tractor out from under you. You need to go out and see these things. If you have the luxury to go to a farm show, whether it's called Ag Progress Days or Farm Science Review or some kind of Ag Expo, and you're going to have all these different vendors with all these different types of tractors and all different types of equipment, those are the places you need to go just to find out what kind of equipment is out there, because it's going to be so mind-boggling. But it doesn't make a difference. You still need to buy a tractor that, if you're going to buy a new one through a dealership, you want one that's within a close vicinity to where you live. So if you have a breakdown, you can get it fixed. You also want to have, like I say, good customer service support, and you want to be happy with your purchase. But if I have a dealership that's 5 minutes from my house, and that is not a piece of equipment that I want to run, I'd rather have a dealership that's 100 miles away, because I'm happier with the tractor that I'm buying. So again, that has a lot to do with it. You need to really want to have the machine that you have. So basically, the best thing I can tell you is shop around to every dealership, check on what they have to sell. And I don't care if it's a skid steer, I don't care if it's an excavator, like I say, a tractor. Because we are talking mostly about tractors, you should be going to see every model out there. Try them out, try the loaders, ask them about what options they come with, how many different remotes can they handle, the category 1, category 2, category 3, what horsepower you're looking for, look at the prices, and look at the deals. And then make your decision if you want to buy brand new. And if you're looking for a used piece of equipment, at least you're going to find a brand or a model that interests you, and then you can start looking for that and look for used pieces of equipment, and we'll talk about that next. But right now I'm talking about going to dealerships, do your homework. That's the best thing I can tell you, and just start asking questions and ask every person what their thoughts are. But only you make that decision whether you want to buy it new or not. But do not fall in the trap of buying the first or second tractor you see, just like you do on cars. Tractors are very important, and you want to get the best tractor for the money that you're going to be happy with personally. And that's really all I can tell you without, kind of nitpicking. Each of us has our own needs, and that's kind of why I started this series, to give you guys ideas. But when it comes down to going to a dealership, go in wide-eyed and do not sign the first day. Go home and think about it. Don't let these salesmen con you into just signing on a dotted line. Go and do your homework. Ask around. Talk, especially new tractors. They come and go all day long. Look at as many brands as you can and try them out. That's the best solution I can tell you. And find out about these dealers and if they have your back. Another thing that I want to discuss that I think is really important is when you're going out and shopping to purchase these tractors, and you're looking in your mind of saying, I want a brush hog, or I plan on using this tractor for all these variety of different options. Just like I've told you before, you got to think out of the box of what you're going to do with that tractor, not just today, but what you plan on doing maybe 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And, you need to find out what your limitations are, and ask this person that's your salesman, can this tractor handle a 6-foot brush hog or a 7-foot brush hog, or could it pull a 15-foot batwing mower? You don't know where you're going to go, but those are the options that you have. And the reason I bring this up is I'm just as guilty. Just like in the series that I've talked about, every tractor based on its size is going to have a different job. And, to me, for my operation, utility tractors, I believe, are the best tractor for the money because the versatility of them is great. And I personally, like I said, love my 70-horse tractor. That, I think, is the best size for what I do. And if I had one piece of equipment by horsepower, what is the best, tractor for my money? It was a 70-horse tractor. But only I knew that because I knew what I did with it. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that you need to find what's best for you and what fits your needs. And, you need to talk to the dealer and say, what kind of attachments can I pull with this equipment? You want to know off the top of your head what you're doing. I have a guy, a friend of mine that, I work with. He bought a tractor, and I asked him, I go, what category do you have of that tractor? He doesn't even know. He has some simple attachments, but he doesn't know what category he has because he doesn't use a lot of attachments. He has no need for those attachments. And he uses his tractor for just basic stuff. So what I'm saying is that by using and talking to the dealership and finding out as much as you can and learn from that dealer what you can do with that equipment, that's why it's so important. All these tractors come with different sizes and different widths, and different attachments go with a different piece of equipment. And we talked about this before on other things. You have category 1 tractors, category 2 tractors. Most of the tractors that most of you guys are going to be buying for your first tractor, they're going to be either compact tractor size. A lot of them are going to be category 1, and then there's category 2, which a lot of them are your utility tractors from 40 horsepower up, could be in the category 2. Normally category 2 is around 50. But, my point is that you're getting into different levels of equipment. But the most common piece of equipment a lot of times is around a 72-inch attachment. So you want something that you can pull with the right piece of equipment. The other thing too is if you ever look at YouTube videos, the tractors that are modeling a lot of the equipment, sometimes they're bigger tractors, not smaller tractors, that are able to do more work with it. So it's more of a selling point. So you got to make sure you match the right tractor to the right attachment is where I'm going, and use the dealership to educate you. But just because they say that the minimum horsepower to pull something may be a certain horsepower, you're going to find out though sometimes a little more horsepower is better than a little, meaning the bare minimum. And that's kind of where I'm going with that. And again, a lot of times your dealers may not have the experience to understand what attachments can go with it. But what's ironic about dealerships, a lot of dealerships sell attachments, or they're dealers of different attachments from different brands, but they may not have a lot of that on site. So that's why it's important also to find out and be educated more about your purchase. you know, like I said, financing wise, you cannot beat going to a dealership. And the dealerships, they will give you a better deal. But when we talk about financing and say you have something that's 0% for 84 months, compare that to what you're going to pay if you had a 7% interest rate and find out how much money you're giving back to the bank based on the loan and the terms of the loan. You know, when you have 0%, to me, that's like free money. You just have to make the minimum payment. But unfortunately, a lot of times that minimum payment may be pretty pricey. You know, but what I'm trying to say is that if that tractor or that piece of equipment makes you money, you know, the less you have to pay in interest is really a big win. And sometimes buying new almost guarantees you years of good service. And that's what you're buying. You're looking at a tractor that has low hours and it's going to be able to perform for you for a long period of time, you know. And it all depends on your use, because a lot of guys, especially when you start out, aren't going to use your tractor as much. But if you're actually using it to do a service, whether you're brush hogging a long time, or like for me, you know, during the summertime, a lot of my tractors are used in the hay baling operation, and they're run 8 hours a day, you know, 3 or 4 days a week, if not more, and throughout the summertime. And they're running I put a lot of hours on them, more than I would if they were just sitting around doing idle work. So, you know, you want to get a piece of equipment that you can run and know it's going to run and work daily, you know, because that's what I like about having newer stuff, is I'm almost guaranteed it's going to work. Just like your car, you know, you have a good car, you know, you want to invest in it. The other thing too is repairs are really expensive when you're buying older equipment. And when you buy something new from a dealership, you're not paying for the mechanic rates. And, you know, like I have my own mechanic that works for me, but, you know, all these mechanics, you can range from $85 to $125 an hour, and it's going to add up relatively quickly. So the more work you have done in your tractor all the time, the more you're going to have to pay. And I've dropped a lot of money on a lot of used pieces of equipment because of engine failures. So I am kind of like not, you know, initially I was scared to talk about dealerships, but after having some major repairs done on some equipment, I kind of lean more toward buying new because I want reliability and I want something that has a good value. And most of these tractors will hold their value when you buy them and you take care of them. You know, and that's why you can find farm tractors that are 20, 30, 40 years old and still running strong, because people took care of them. And same thing holds true today. The downfall is the tractors of today versus tractors of yesteryear, and I'm talking only 20 years ago. You know, some of these tractors now, the metal's flimsy. You know, they're basically just a motor with some real cheesy little fenders on them, and you can just easily bend them. You know, when you look at the sheet metal on some of these older tractors in the 70s and 80s, you can stand on the hood. These new tractors, you can't stand on the hood at all. You'll just dent them in very easily. So you're not getting the same quality of steel as you used to have. I mean, Christ, they even have plastic fenders on some tractors. So it's really not the same. But you're paying a lot for not, I guess you want to say. But, you know, things have changed a lot. You know, now there's more loader technology. You know, a lot of tractors are sold, you know, from 100 horse plus down, with guaranteed with loaders. You know, so you have those as options. You have shuttle shift, which you didn't normally have back in the early days. Almost a lot of tractors are now four-wheel drive, and that's a good thing. You have a lot of different counterweight options out there. You know, whether you're using an attachment, they can load the tires with weights, or there's wheel weights that you can use. There's just a lot of different things out there. You know, there's different seats that exist from dealerships. You know, air ride versus, you know, conventional. You know, and if you're on the tractor seat a lot, I think you should look into an air ride. I don't have one, but I kind of really want one. And after sitting on the tractor in the hay fields for 8 to 12 hours straight, trust me, longer, the better the seat, it's well worth the investment, even though it might cost you an extra $1,000. You know, air ride may be the answer, and I kind of regret not having that right now. So look around and shop. You know, look at your options. And the other thing, too, is don't get wrapped up on what people say on the internet. You know, I see so much. When I was doing my own research, I'd go for reviews, and you're going to have on any topic or anything reviews, and some people are going to make a lot of negative and some are going to say a lot of positive, but it's an opinion. Only you need to form the opinion. But all I'm trying to tell you is be happy with what your purchase is. You know what your options are, know what you're buying that tractor for, and if you know that you're going to grow or think you're going to grow, do not buy too small of a tractor. You're going to be kicking yourself in the butt all the way down the road because you screwed up. You know, you want to buy the right tractor. and have it last for you for a long period of time. And that's why I say always buy bigger, don't buy too small. And price is irrelevant, because I'm telling you, once it's paid off, you know, you'll be fine. I've never owned a new car in my entire life. I've never bought anything new in my entire life. But guess what I buy? Brand new tractors. And I bought 2 of them, and I'll even buy another one if I can. Because, you know, if I can get them at 0% interest, that to me it's free money, and I'm going to get a better tractor, and I am expecting to have a lot less maintenance problems, and it's well worth it in the long haul. But again, are you going to be able to make money with that tractor? If you're just buying a tractor and not making any income from it, or not planning on doing anything that's going to generate income, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to justify purchasing something. But when you're making money with something, or you have the potential to make money with something, then I suggest that you buy something that you know is going to do the job and do it well. And that's kind of my little take on that end of it. You know, I think that you got to buy something you're happy with. And that's really the bottom line to any kind of equipment that you purchase. Buy the best piece that you can afford that's going to give you the best return on your investment. And, you know, tractors is something that, to me, I have like 5 or 6 tractors right now. And I've learned that they have value. And I'm taking care of my tractors more now than I did in the past, because I know they're vital to me. And I've learned how to make money doing side jobs and using for my farm. And every piece of equipment I have is a vital piece. So, and I'll cover some of this stuff in later videos and explain that rationale behind that too. But, you know, today when we're talking about going to dealerships, you know, it's very important to you shop around, and you got to ask the right questions and start picking the brains of these dealers. And if you're not educated, you need to educate yourself about what you're buying, or get the experience of talking to these dealers and get yourself educated of what's available. You know, because for every tractor that's out there, you have options. Some of them have remotes. Some of them have different transmissions. Sometimes some of them will say, well, you can have an 8-speed or you can have a 12-speed. You know, my suggestion is get the one that has the higher gears, get 12-speed versus an 8-speed. You know, do you have shuttle shift? You know, I personally like shuttle shift, and, you know, on tractors. And I also like, you know, I'm not afraid of, you know, having them stick shifted. You know, we can, we call it shift on the fly. You want tractors that, you know, have clutches that could be used. Some of them, I'm not that big of a fan on where you operate them that are hydrostatic. They don't do nothing for me. I need something that's more stick and clutch geared. I like that better. And that works best for me, but I like the fact of having shuttle shift. You know, again, I've said this before, if you buy a loader, you need to have a 4-wheel drive machine. Don't skimp on that, because, you know, it comes with a tractor, having 4-wheel drive makes a heck of a difference not having it. You know, they come with different tires and different options there. That's up to you, whether you want an ag tire, the R series tires, or turf tires. It all depends on what your goals are. You know, I have mostly ag because I do agricultural stuff, but, you know, is that necessarily the best option? For what I do, the answer is yes, but for what other people do, it might not work for you. So it all depends on what your options are. But again, shop around and see what your options are and decide what you want to do. And, you know, the best part is check out the attachments that could be used in that piece of equipment, because some people, I'm telling you right now, you have a goal and a dream, but then you find out the tractor you're buying is too small to do the jobs that you want. You're going to be kicking yourself in the butt. Like I say, you got to get the right size tractor, and it's better to have a too big of a tractor than too small. But sometimes you get to the point where you get too big, where you can't get that attachments that you want to run. And that's why, like I say, I think the 70 horse tractor is the greatest, because somewhere around that range, because sometimes the 100 horse tractors are just a little too big and a little too wide. The 70 horse tractor is just maxed out right where it needs to be, and it's going to give you that extra horsepower and the extra and some of the extra bells and whistles that you're going to like if you have a cab tractor, or even how you utilize it. And, you know, you got to shop and see what works for you. That's really comes down to personal choice. You know, I'm in northeastern Ohio. I love cabs, and it's well worth the investment for a cab. But if you don't, you know, you live in a southern state, you know, maybe a cab is not for you. But for me, I use it to plow my driveway in the winter for snow. You know, if it's 0 out with blowing winds, I want to be in a nice warm cab with the heater going and the radio going. and I can just have a big smile on my face because I enjoy plowing my snow. And, you know, it might take 2 or 3 hours, but I'm warm, happy, and comfortable. And that's what I want, what I like. You know, I live in northeastern Ohio. You know, I have a spring that's wet. I have a fall that's cold. You know, and I have a nasty winters that, you know, could be very, very, very cold and very freezing. And, you know, I want to be comfortable. So for me, cabs are important. And, you know, when I do hay in the summertime, I love to have air conditioning. I like to be out of the sun, you know. And again, I had the option of being a cab, keeping all that pollen and dust off my face. So again, this was my choice. But some people like to have the open air, and I have open cab tractors too. So, but choose what works best for you. And that's kind of where I'm going with this. But the dealers are a great place to learn, and you got to pick their brain and ask around, and there's no dumb question. But, you know, also test these guys too and find out if they know what they're talking about. You know, don't let them sell you something that you may not want to buy into. You know, educate yourself. And that's how you get better, is by talking to all these dealerships. So those are my suggestions. With that said, I'll talk to you guys later. Stay safe. And until next podcast, you know, if you're looking at tractors, you want to start a farming from scratch, please, you know, follow my podcast series, and hopefully it's going to just grow from here, and hopefully some people find it useful. So again, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later.